The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space with desperate intensity, its alien harmonic screaming across 17 light-years to reach the Terran listening posts. Admiral Corvin Thane stood before the massive holographic display, aboard the dreadnought Retribution's Edge, watching the translated message loop for the 5th time in as many minutes. "Please, humans of Earth." The melodic voice of High Counselor Yeveth pleaded through the speakers, her crystalline features contorted with fear. "The Vorthic hegemony has broken through our outer defenses. Our children burn in their glass cities while we speak. We offer you everything: our quantum-forged technology, our stargates, our accumulated knowledge of 3 millennia. Save us, and we will elevate your species beyond your wildest dreams." Thane's weathered fingers drummed against the command console. The Etherian Republic had been humanity's first contact with galactic civilization 12 years ago, their elegant ships appearing in Earth's solar system like crystal butterflies dancing among the stars. They had been condescending then, offering humanity junior membership in their enlightened galactic community, treating humans like promising but primitive cousins who might someday evolve beyond their violent nature. Now they were begging. "Status report, Commander Vega," Thane ordered, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had seen too many wars. Commander Lucia Vega stepped forward, her augmented arm interfacing directly with the ship's tactical systems. 17 Terran fleets are ready for immediate deployment, sir. The Retribution's Edge, Iron Resolve, and Burning Covenant anchor strike groups Alpha through Gamma. Total complement: 600 vessels, including 37 dreadnoughts and 112 destroyers. The new quantum fusion warheads are loaded and ready. The Vorthic, Thane asked, though he already knew the answer would be grim. "Xenocidal Empire, sir. They've consumed 14 star systems in the past century, stripping them bare and enslaving or exterminating native populations. Intelligence suggests they're using some form of bioweapon that converts organic matter into their own twisted biology. The Etherian fleet, what's left of it, is barely holding their perimeter." On the display, tactical projections showed the Etherian core worlds like jewels scattered across dark space, their defensive lines collapsing like sand castles before a tsunami. The Vorthic advance was methodical, merciless, and absolutely unstoppable by conventional means. "Sir," interrupted Lieutenant Torres from the communication station, "we're receiving secondary transmissions from the Etherian fleet. They're offering us full technological integration, everything, faster than light communications, matter conversion, even their consciousness transfer protocols." Thane's eyes narrowed. The Etherians had jealously guarded their technological secrets, doling out minor improvements to humanity like treats to a performing animal. Now they were offering their crown jewels. "Patch me through to the Etherian High Command," he ordered. The hologram shifted, revealing the interior of what appeared to be a damaged warship. High Counselor Yeveth materialized before him, her normally pristine robes torn and singed, her luminous blue skin marred by what looked like burn marks. "Admiral Thane," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Thank the stars. How quickly can your fleets reach our position?" "That depends," Thane replied carefully, "on the terms of our alliance." "Terms?" Yeveth's expression flickered with something that might have been offense. "Admiral, my people are dying. Surely the bonds of..." "Counselor," Thane interrupted, his voice cold as vacuum. "When humanity first reached out to the galaxy, your people offered us junior partnership, observer status. You made it clear that humans were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous to be trusted with real power. Now you want us to bleed for you." Yeveth's composure cracked. "Yes, fine. We underestimated you. We were wrong. But if the Vorthic succeed here, they'll turn toward Earth next. You know this." "Perhaps," Thane agreed. "But that's humanity's problem to solve. If we're going to fight your war, we do it as equals. Full technological exchange, full strategic command authority, and when this is over, the Etherian Republic recognizes Terra as a sovereign power with veto authority over galactic policy. You're negotiating while we burn." Yeveth's voice rose to a shriek. "I'm making sure we don't die for nothing," Thane replied. "Accept our terms, or face the Vorthic alone." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of explosions echoing through Yeveth's ship. Finally, the Etherian leader bowed her head. "Agreed," she whispered. "The Republic accepts your terms." Thane smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Fleet Command, this is Admiral Thane. All ships, prepare for quantum jump. We're going to war. As the Terran fleet powered their drives, none of them could have imagined that their new allies were already planning their betrayal. The quantum jump deposited the Terran fleet at the edge of the Etherian home system like a thunderclap in the void. 17 battle groups materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that had been forged in the crucible of Earth's bloodiest conflicts. The Retribution's edge took point, its massive bulk dwarfing even the largest Etherian vessels. "Sweet merciful stars," whispered Commander Vega as the tactical display updated. "Sir, you need to see this." The Etherian Third Fleet hung in space like broken glass, their elegant vessels shattered and burning. Where once 300 proud ships had patrolled the outer system, fewer than 40 remained functional. The survivors clustered around the massive bulk of the Etherian flagship Eternal Harmony, its crystalline hull spider-webbed with cracks that leaked atmosphere in glittering streams. But it was the enemy that made Thane's blood run cold. The Vorthic ships defied easy description. They appeared to be grown rather than built, their hulls resembling massive arthropod carapaces covered in pulsing veins and bleeding orifices. The largest of them stretched nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its surface crawling with what appeared to be organic weapons systems that twitched and writhed like living things. "Biological ships," Vega reported, her voice tight with disgust. Intelligence was right. They're using converted biomass from their conquests as construction material. Energy readings suggest they're still alive, somehow. "How many?" Thane asked. 4 to 7. Capital ships, roughly 200 smaller vessels. They formed a blockade around Ethon Prime. "Sir, they're not just besieging the planet, they're feeding on it." The display zoomed in on the Etherian homeworld, revealing a sight that would haunt Thane's dreams for years to come. Massive tentacles had erupted from the Vorthic ships, extending down through the atmosphere to the planet's surface. Where they touched, the crystal cities of the Etherians were dissolving, their structures converting into raw, organic matter that flowed back up the feeding tubes. "Estimated civilian casualties?" Thane asked quietly. "4 billion and rising," Vega replied. "At current consumption rates, the planet will be completely stripped in 18 hours. Admiral." The communication channel crackled with High Counselor Yevis' voice. "You see what we face. Please, you must act quickly." Thane studied the tactical situation. The Vorthic had arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around Ethon Prime, their feeding tentacles making them vulnerable, but also desperate. They would fight viciously to protect their meal. "Commander Vega, signal all fleet commanders. We're going to hit them hard and fast before they can detach from the planet." Battle Plan Reaper concentrated alpha strikes on their largest vessels, followed by close-quarters engagement. "The moment they pull those tentacles back, they'll be mobile again, sir," interrupted Lieutenant Torres. "The Etherian fleet is requesting permission to join the attack." Thane glanced at the pitiful remnants of the once proud Third Fleet. "Negative. They're barely holding together. Have them maintain defensive positions around their wounded ships. This is our fight now." The Terran fleet swept forward in 3 massive wings, their dark hulls sliding through space like hunting sharks. The Retribution's edge led the center formation, its primary batteries charging with building whines that echoed through the ships. "Hull range to 1,000,000 kilometers and closing," Vega reported. "All ships, weapons free. Target priority, feeding ships first, then mobile vessels. Make every shot count." The first salvo erupted from the Terran fleet like a miniature constellation, hundreds of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds screaming across the void. The lead Vorthic vessels, caught in the middle of their feeding frenzy, barely had time to register. They attacked before the barrage slammed into them, the largest feeding ship, a grotesque thing nearly as massive as the Retribution's edge, took direct hits from 6 dreadnought main batteries. Its carapace cracked like an egg, spraying black ichor across space as its internal organs ruptured. The feeding tentacle attached to Ethon Prime convulsed once, then went limp, releasing millions of gallons of partially digested biomass into the planet's atmosphere. But the Vorthic response was immediate and savage. The remaining vessels began detaching from the planet, their feeding tentacles withdrawing with sickening wet sounds. As they pulled free, the ships themselves began to change, their hulls splitting open to reveal rows of organic weapons that pulsed with bioluminescent fury. "Incoming!" Vega shouted as the first wave of Vorthic bioprojectiles reached the Terran fleet. The enemy weapons were unlike anything in human military doctrine. Instead of metal and explosive, they fired living ammunition creatures that screamed through space on wings of calcified bone. their bodies packed with corrosive acids and neural toxins. When they struck the Terran shields, they didn't simply explode, they burrowed. The destroyer Savage Wind was the first to fall, its shields overwhelmed by a swarm of the creatures. They ate through the hull in seconds, their acid-dissolving armor plating like tissue paper. The ship's death scream echoed across the communication channels as its crew died in agony, their nervous systems liquefied by alien toxins. All ships, maintain formation, Thane ordered as more destroyers began to succumb. Don't let them break our lines. The battle became a nightmare of close-quarters combat as the Vorthic fleet swarmed the Terran. Formation. Their ships moved like living things, flexing and contracting as they maneuvered, their organic weapons spraying death in all directions. The Iron Resolve found itself grappled by a Vorthic cruiser, its hull being slowly dissolved by acidic secretions, while the enemy ship's boring tentacles began punching through the armor. "Sir," Vega called out, her voice barely audible over the din of battle. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them. The Etherians." "The Etherians what?" Thane demanded. "They're withdrawing, sir. The entire surviving Third Fleet is pulling back to minimum safe distance." On the tactical display, Thane watched in growing horror as their supposed allies abandoned the battle, leaving the Terran fleet to face the full fury of the Vorthic swarm alone. In the communication channel, High Counselor Yeveth's voice crackled. "With static, Admiral Thane, the situation has become untenable. We must preserve what remains of our fleet for the defense of our core worlds." "You cowardly," Thane began, but the channel went dead. The first betrayal had begun. The Terran fleet fought alone in the burning void, their ships locked in desperate combat with the Vorthic swarm while their supposed allies watched from a safe distance. Admiral Thane gripped the command rail as the Retribution's edge shuddered under another barrage of bioweapons, the organic projectiles eating through the outer hull like acid through flesh. "Damage report," he barked over the chaos. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Commander Vega responded, her augmented arms sparking as she interfaced with the ship's rapidly failing systems. "We've lost primary sensor ray and port side. Weapons grid, engineering reports containment failure in Reactor 3 on the tactical display." The situation looked increasingly grim. Of the 17 fleet groups that had entered the system, only 11 remained combat effective. The Vorthic had learned quickly, adapting their tactics to exploit every weakness in human ship design. Their bioweapons didn't just destroy, they infected, turning destroyed Terran vessels into grotesque hybrid constructs that turned their guns on their former allies. The heavy cruiser Dauntless had been one of the first to succumb, its crew murdered by neural toxins before the ship's hull began to sprout the telltale bone spurs at feeding tentacles of Vorthic bioconversion. Now it advanced on its former fleet mates, its human-built weapons supplemented by organic artillery that fired streams of living acid. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres called from the communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from the Etherian flagship. Put it through," Thane ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. High Counselor Yeveth appeared on the holographic display, her crystalline features composed in an expression of calculated regret. Behind her, Thane could see the pristine interior of the Eternal Harmony, completely untouched by battle damage. "Admiral Thane," she began, "I regret to inform you that the Etherian High Council has voted to negotiate a separate peace with the Vorthic hegemony." The words hit Thane like a physical blow. "What did you just say?" "The Vorthic have agreed to cease their assault on our remaining worlds in exchange for certain considerations. They have expressed particular interest in studying your human biochemistry and tactical doctrines. You're selling us out," Thane said, his voice deadly quiet. "We're ensuring our species' survival," Yeveth replied. "The Vorthic find humans fascinating. They've agreed to limit their consumption of our worlds to those already under attack, provided we deliver detailed intelligence on human military capabilities and biological samples." Around the bridge, Thane's officers had gone silent, their faces reflecting the same mixture of shock and fury that burned in his chest. Commander Vega's human hand had moved to her sidearm, though the gesture was purely reflexive. "You begged us to save you," Thane said. "We came here. We're dying for you. And we're grateful," Yeveth said, her tone suggesting anything but gratitude. "Your sacrifice has given us the time we needed to negotiate this arrangement. Consider it your contribution to galactic peace, sir," Vega whispered urgently. "The Etherian fleet is moving. They're taking up positions to block our escape routes." On the tactical display, The remaining Etherian ships had spread out in a wide arc behind the Terran fleet, their weapons powered but not yet targeting. The message was clear: surrender or be destroyed. The Vorthik will allow your crews to surrender. Yeveth continued. They promise quick deaths for your military personnel and preservation of your genetic material. For their biological archives. It's more mercy than they usually show. Thane stared at the alien leader for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities. The Terran fleet was trapped between the Vorthik swarm and their former allies, outnumbered and outgunned. By any rational analysis, surrender was the only option that might save some of his people. But Admiral Corvin Thane had not climbed to command of the Terran fleet by making rational decisions. When humanity's survival was at stake, Councillor Yeveth, he said finally, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I have a counter-proposal. I'm listening, she replied, though her tone suggested the conversation was merely a formality. Go to hell. Thane severed the connection and turned to his bridge crew. All ships, this is Admiral Thane. We are now at war with both the Vorthik hegemony and the Etherian Republic. I want full power to all weapons systems. Prepare the Nova charges, sir. Commander Vega protested. The Nova charges are planetary bombardment weapons. If we use them in close combat, the blast radius will take out everything. Within 50,000 kilometers, including us, Thane finished. I'm aware of the specifications. Commander, signal all ships. Any vessel that cannot maintain minimum safe distance is authorized to detonate on contact with enemy forces. We're not surrendering and we're not running. We're going to show these bastards how humans fight when we have nothing left to lose. The bridge crew exchanged glances, understanding the implications. The Nova charges were humanity's most destructive. Weapons short of planet killers, fusion devices designed to shatter entire continents. Using them in fleet combat was tantamount to suicide. Sir, Lieutenant Torres said quietly. What about the civilians on Ethon Prime? There are still billions of them down there. Thane's jaw tightened. The Etherians made their choice when they betrayed us. All hands, prepare for final engagement. We're going to hurt them so badly that they'll remember the name humanity. For the next 1,000 years, the Retribution's edge swung around to face the combined enemy fleet, its remaining weapons charging for what would likely be humanity's last stand in alien space. Around it, the surviving Terran vessels formed up in a tight defensive formation, their crews preparing to sell their lives as dearly as possible. In the distance, the Vorthik swarm began to advance again, their bioships pulsing with anticipation. Behind them, the Etherian fleet powered their weapons, preparing to ensure that none of the humans escaped to carry word of their betrayal back to Earth. Neither enemy force understood that they had just awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since the species first learned to make fire. The absolute, implacable fury of the betrayed. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Thane stood at the center of the bridge, as alarms wailed throughout the Retribution's edge, his weathered face illuminated by the crimson glow of emergency lighting. The tactical display showed the true scope of their predicament. 43 Vorthik bioships advancing from the front, 37 Etherian vessels blocking retreat, and only 9 Terran battle groups still capable of coordinated action. Sir, Commander Vega reported, her augmented interface crackling with data streams. The Vorthik are moving into assault formation. Their bioweapons are showing increased activity. They're preparing for a feeding frenzy. And our former allies? Thane asked. The Etherians are maintaining their blockade position. They're broadcasting demands for our surrender on all frequencies. Thane smiled, the expression cold enough to freeze helium. Then it's time to remind both of these species why humanity conquered its own planet before. Reaching the stars. Signal. All ships, implement Protocol 7. The bridge crew went silent. Protocol 7 existed in the deepest classified sections of Terran military doctrine. A tactical framework so brutal that it had been deemed inhumane for use against human enemies. It was based on a simple premise. When facing extinction, morality became a luxury humanity could not afford. Sir, Lieutenant Torres said quietly. Protocol 7 requires. I know what it requires, Thane interrupted. Execute immediately. Across the Terran fleet, ships began to undergo radical transformations. Bay doors opened to reveal weapon systems that officially didn't exist: biological warfare dispensers, nanoweapon fabricators. And worst of all, the dreaded Reaper drones that had been banned by every civilized nation on Earth. The Destroyer. Vengeance was the first to deploy. its hull splitting open like a mechanical flower to disgorge a cloud of microscopic machines. The nanobots spread through space like metallic spores, too small to be detected by enemy sensors, but programmed with a single, terrible purpose: to consume and replicate using any available organic matter. First wave deployed, Vega reported. Nanobots are dispersing through the combat zone. Estimated contact with enemy vessels in 30 seconds. The Vorthic bioships continued their advance, unaware of the invisible death spreading toward them. When the nanobots reached the first enemy vessel, a medium cruiser, covered in pulsing organic growths, the effect was immediate and horrifying. The bioship's living hull began to bubble and dissolve as billions of microscopic machines consumed its cellular structure, converting the biomass into more nanobots. The creature that had once been a proud warship writhed in space like a dying animal, its organic weapons firing randomly as its nervous system collapsed. Direct hit on target. Alpha 7, Vega announced with grim satisfaction. Bioship is undergoing catastrophic cellular breakdown. The nanobots are replicating exponentially, but the Vorthic were quick learners. As the first infected ship died in agony, the rest of the swarm began to adapt. Their biohulls sprouted new defense mechanisms, hardened carapaces that could resist the nanobots, and specialized immune cells that hunted down the mechanical invaders. They're adapting faster than projected, Vega warned. The nanobots are having reduced effectiveness against the secondary targets. Then we escalate. Thane replied. Deploy the Reaper drones. The heavy cruiser Implacable launched its deadly cargo. 50 autonomous war machines, each one a masterpiece of human engineering and cruelty. The Reaper drones were roughly humanoid in shape, but built from materials that could withstand the heat of stellar cores. Their programming was simple: identify, infiltrate, and eliminate all biological life within target vessels. The first Reaper reached a Vorthic bioship within minutes, its molecular blade appendages carving through the organic hull like a scalpel. Through flesh, once inside, it began its work with mechanical precision, dissecting the ship's biological systems while the crew screamed in languages that had no words for such methodical horror. Reaper Alpha 1 has achieved infiltration, Torres reported, his voice carefully controlled. Bioship designated Tango 4 is showing massive internal damage. Estimated crew casualties, 100%. But even as the human weapons carved through the Vorthic fleet, the Etherians were making their own move. The Eternal Harmony powered forward, its crystalline hull gleaming as it brought its weapons to bear on the Terran rear guard. Incoming from the Etherian flagship, Vega announced. They're targeting our support vessels. Eli Cruiser Steadfast exploded in a bloom of superheated plasma as Etherian particle beams sliced through its armor. The crew of 200 died instantly, their bodies vaporized by temperatures hot enough to fuse silicon. Return fire. Thane ordered. All ships, engage the Etherian forces. Show them the cost of betrayal. The Terran fleet split its attention between two enemies, their weapons painted space with lethal light. The dreadnought Iron Resolve turned its massive guns on the Eternal Harmony, sending a barrage of quantum fusion warheads toward the Etherian flagship. The alien vessel shields flared as the weapons struck, their crystalline matrix buckling under the assault. But instead of pressing the attack, the Eternal Harmony began to broadcast on all frequencies. Human vessels. High Counselor Yeva's voice echoed through space. You are committing genocide against civilian populations. The bioweapons you have deployed will consume all organic life in this system, including the billions of innocents on Ethon Prime. Thane's expression didn't change. Commander Vega, what's our nanobot spread pattern? The replication cascade is expanding beyond combat parameters, she replied quietly. Current projections show the swarm reaching the planet's atmosphere in approximately 6 hours. Once it enters the biosphere, she didn't need to finish. Everyone on the bridge understood the implications. The nanobots would consume every living thing on Ethon Prime, converting the entire planet into a gray, lifeless sphere of self-replicating machines. Sir, Lieutenant Torres said urgently. There are still 4 billion civilians down there. Surely we can't. The Etherians should have thought of that before they betrayed us. Thane replied. Signal all ships. Continue current tactical deployment. Let our former allies explain to their people why they chose to sacrifice them for political advantage. In the vacuum of space, the battle raged on with increasing brutality. Vorthic bioships died screaming as Reaper drones carved through their living hulls, while Etherian vessels exploded in crystalline fragments under concentrated Terran fire. The nanobots spread through the combat zone like a plague, consuming everything they touched and growing stronger with each meal dot and far below. On the surface of Ethon Prime, 4 billion Etherian civilians went about their daily lives, unaware that their leader's betrayal had already sealed their doom. The lesson was being written in blood and fire across the stars. Humanity was not a species that forgave betrayal. The space around Ethon Prime had become a charnel house of twisted metal and dying biomatter. Admiral Thane watched from the bridge of the Retribution's edge as the battle reached its crescendo. 3 species locked in a death spiral that would leave none of them unchanged. The Vorthic had adapted to humanity's nanoweapons, their bioships, now sporting hardened carapaces that could resist the microscopic invaders. But adaptation came at a cost. Their vessels had become slower, less maneuverable, and the energy required to maintain their new defenses was drawing power from their weapon systems. Target the weak points in their armor plating, Thane ordered. As the Retribution's edge lined up for another attack run, those adaptation plates are biological. They have to have circulatory systems feeding them. The Dreadnought's main battery spoke in unison, sending a spread of plasma bolts toward the massive Vorthic flagship. The bioship's new armor held against the first impacts, but the sustained barrage began to tell. Cracks appeared in the hardened plates, leaking the black ichor that served as the creature's blood. Direct hit, Commander Vega announced. Target is showing massive trauma to its primary circulatory system. The adaptation plates are beginning to necrotize, but even as the Vorthic flagship writhed in agony, its escorts pressed their attack. A pack of smaller bioships swarmed around the Terran heavy cruiser Defiant, their organic weapons vomiting streams of corrosive acid that ate through the vessel's armor. Like tissue paper, Captain Morrison's voice crackled over the communication channel. This is Defiant. We've lost structural integrity on all decks. Whole breach in the reactor compartment. We're going critical. All ships, clear the Defiant, Thane ordered, but it was too late. The heavy cruiser's reactor containment failed in a burst of fusion fire that turned the ship into a miniature star. The explosion vaporized the Vorthic escorts and sent the others tumbling through space. Their bio-hulls charred and blackened. Of the Defiant's crew of 800, nothing remained but superheated plasma. The Etherians, meanwhile, had formed their own battle line behind the Terran fleet. Their crystalline ships moved with deadly precision, their weapons carved from the same quantum-coherent materials as their hulls. Where human weapons relied on brute force and Vorthic bioships used organic fury, the Etherians fought with mathematical perfection. The eternal harmony had recovered from the earlier bombardment, its crystal matrix having regenerated the damaged sections. Now it advanced on the Terran rear guard, its weapons charging with building harmonics that made the very fabric of space-time ring. Like a bell, quantum resonance weapons, Vega reported, her voice tight with concern. They're targeting our hull frequencies. If they achieve resonance lock, the destroyer stalwart simply came apart. As the Etherian beam struck it, its molecular bond severed by precisely tuned quantum vibrations. The ship didn't explode, it dissolved, its crew dying as their cellular structure lost cohesion and scattered into component atoms. Evasive maneuvers, Thane ordered. Don't let them achieve target lock. The Terran fleet scattered like startled birds, their ships weaving through space in random patterns designed to prevent the Etherians from calculating their resonance frequencies. But the movement cost them formation integrity, making them vulnerable to the Vorthic bioships that pressed their attack with increasing desperation. The light cruiser Intrepid found itself isolated, surrounded by 3 Vorthic vessels that had adapted their feeding tentacles into boarding mechanisms. The bioships latched onto the human vessel's hull and began to cut through the armor with organic torches that burned at temperatures exceeding the ship's design tolerances. This is Captain Reyes, came the transmission from the Intrepid. They're cutting through our hull. We can't shake them off. Hold position, Thane ordered. We're sending support. But before the rescue ships could reach the Intrepid, the Vorthic boarders had breached the hull. The communication channel filled with the sounds of combat as the human crew fought desperately against invaders that were more nightmare than opponent. There, in the corridors, Reyes reported, his voice strained. These things, they're not just soldiers. They're converting our people. The crew, oh God, the crew is changing. The Intrepid's weapons suddenly turned on the nearest Terran vessel, the cruiser's own gunners having been infected by Vorthic bioagents that overwrote their nervous systems. The converted humans fired on their former allies with mechanical precision. their higher brain functions replaced by alien imperatives. "Sir," Vega said quietly, "the Intrepid is lost. Request permission to fire." Thane closed his eyes for a moment, seeing the faces of the 600 crew members who had served aboard the cruiser. Good people, all of them, people with families. Back on Earth, who would never see them again. "Fire," he ordered. E-Retribution's edge turned its guns on the Intrepid, sending a barrage of high explosive rounds into the cruiser's reactor compartment. The ship died in a flash of nuclear fire, taking its converted crew and Vorthic boarders with it. The battle had now cost both sides dearly. Of the original 17 Terran battle groups, only 6 remained combat effective. The Vorthic swarm had been reduced to fewer than 20 vessels, most of them showing severe damage from the sustained assault. The Etherian fleet had lost nearly half its ships to concentrated human fire, their perfect crystal hulls shattered by the crude but effective weapons of Earth. But the most horrific casualties were yet to come. On the surface of Ethon Prime, the nanobots had reached the upper atmosphere and begun their descent toward the planet's surface. The first contact came at the polar research stations, where Etherian scientists working on climate data suddenly found their equipment dissolving into gray goo. "Sir," Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice hollow, "we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the planet's surface. The nanobots have entered the biosphere. Conservative estimates suggest complete planetary sterilization within 12 hours. High Counselor Yev's voice suddenly filled the communication channels, no longer composed but screaming with rage and desperation. "You monsters! You're murdering billions of innocents. Call off your weapons. The time for negotiation has passed." Thane replied coldly, "Your people chose their fate when they betrayed us. Now they'll live with the consequences. You're no better than the Vorthok." Yeva shrieked. "No," Thane agreed. "We're worse. The Vorthok kill for survival. We kill for honor." The battle raged on. 3 species locked in mutual destruction, while below them, an entire world began to die. The nanobots had reached Ethon Prime's surface, and the planet was dying in real time. Admiral Thane watched the tactical display as gray death spread across the crystalline cities, like a malignant cancer, consuming everything in its path. For billion lives hung in the balance, and the weight of that genocide pressed down on him. "Like a physical thing, sir," Commander Vega said quietly. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the edge of the system. Something big is coming." The display shifted to show the outer perimeter, where space itself seemed to be tearing open. Through the dimensional rifts came ships unlike anything in the known galaxy, sleek vessels of impossible geometry that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process. "Unknown contacts," Lieutenant Torres reported, his voice tight with stress. "Configuration matches no known species. They're broadcasting on ancient precursor frequencies. The precursors, the mythical first civilization that has supposedly seeded the galaxy with life before vanishing into legend. Every species has stories of them, but none had ever encountered actual precursor technology. Until now. This is the precursor remnant fleet," came a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds rather than through audio systems. "We have monitored the current conflict and determined that immediate intervention is required. All combatants will cease hostilities immediately or face temporal dissolution." The alien fleet was even the right word for the collection of reality-bending constructs that had emerged from the rift spread through the system with impossible speed. They didn't move through space so much as rewrite it around themselves, existing wherever they chose to be. "Admiral," the precursor voice continued, "your species has deployed weapons that threaten the fundamental balance of biological life. In this sector, the nanobotic plague you have unleashed will not be contained to this system if allowed to continue." Thane felt a chill that had nothing to do with the vacuum of space. "What do you mean?" "Your nanobots have exceeded their original programming parameters. They are adapting, evolving, learning. Within 72 hours, they will achieve spaceflight capability and begin spreading to neighboring systems. Within 1 galactic year, they will have consumed all organic life in a sphere encompassing 14,000 star systems." The revelation hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. What they had thought was a localized weapon was actually a potential extinction event for half the galaxy. "However," the precursor continued, "we offer an alternative. Surrender your command to us, and we will contain the nanobotic plague. Your species will be relocated to a quarantine sector where you can no longer threaten galactic stability." "And if we refuse?" Thane asked. Then we will implement temporal reversion protocols. This entire system will be reset to its state prior to your arrival. All combatants will be returned to their points of origin with their memories intact, but the nanobotic plague will be erased from existence. Thane looked around his bridge. Seeing the faces of his crew, they had come here to save a species that had betrayed them, and now they were being offered a chance to undo their mistake. It should have been an easy choice. But Admiral Corvin Thane was not a man who accepted easy choices when harder ones were available. What happens to the Etherians? He asked. They will face the consequences of their betrayal without the threat of extinction, as will the Vorthok, who will be returned to their previous feeding grounds, so everyone gets to walk away from this. Thane said slowly, everyone except humanity, which gets locked away like a dangerous animal. Your species has demonstrated that it cannot be trusted with advanced weaponry. The precursor replied, the quarantine is for the protection of all. Galactic civilization. Thane looked at the tactical display one more time. The Vorthok fleet was down to a dozen ships, their bio-hull scarred and blackened. The Etherians had lost 2/3 of their vessels, including several of their most advanced warships. Both species had paid a heavy price for their actions, but they would survive. They would rebuild, and they would remember this day as the moment they learned that humanity could not be betrayed without consequence. I have a counter-proposal, Thane said. Speak. We'll call off the nanobots. We'll even help you contain them, but we don't accept quarantine. Instead, we propose a new galactic order, one where species that break their word face immediate and permanent consequences. You are in no position to negotiate, the precursor said. Aren't we? Thane smiled grimly. You need us to shut down the nanobots voluntarily. Oh, I'm sure you could do it by force, but that would require you to use more power than you want to reveal. The fact that you're negotiating at all tells me you're not as omnipotent as you want us to believe. The silence stretched for long moments. Around the system, the precursor vessels hung motionless, their impossible geometry shifting in patterns that hurt to look at directly. What do you propose? The voice finally asked. Simple, Thane replied. Humanity becomes the galaxy's enforcement arm. When species break their treaties, when they betray their allies, when they commit atrocities against civilian populations, they answer to us. We become the sword of galactic justice. You would make yourselves the arbiters of interstellar law. Someone has to be, Thane said, and we've already proven we're willing to pay any price to make sure betrayal has consequences. Commander Vega looked at him in shock. Sir, you're talking about making humanity into the galaxy's police force. That would mean constant warfare, endless conflicts. Yes, Thane agreed. It would. But it would also mean that no species would ever again think they could use humans as expendable pawns in their political games. On the surface of Ethone Prime, the nanobots had consumed 3 of the planet's major cities, leaving nothing but gray wasteland where millions of Etherians had once lived. The death toll was approaching 1 billion and climbing by the minute. The Etherians betrayed us. Thane continued, the Vorthok are xenocidal monsters. Both species deserve to face justice for their crimes, but instead of extinction, we offer them something else, submission to a new galactic order where betrayal and genocide are met with immediate and overwhelming force. The precursor voice was quiet for a long time. When it spoke again, there seemed to be something almost like approval in its tone. You would turn your species' capacity for violence into a tool of cosmic justice. Exactly, Thane replied. Humanity doesn't just wage war for survival or conquest. We wage war for principle. Give us the authority to enforce those principles, and we'll keep the galaxy's predators in check. The tactical display suddenly changed, showing not just the current battle, but projections of future conflicts. System after system lit up with potential flashpoints, territorial disputes, trade wars, ethnic conflicts that could spiral into interstellar genocide. The galaxy is vast, the precursor observed. There are over 10,000 species spread across millions of worlds. The task you propose would require an enormous military commitment. Then we'll build an enormous military, Thane replied. Humanity has always been good at war. Now we'll be good at preventing it. Another long silence. Then, slowly, the precursor vessels began to move, taking up positions around the nanobotic plague sites. Very well, the voice said. We will contain the nanobotic plague and establish the legal framework for your proposal. But understand this, Admiral, if humanity abuses this authority, if you become the very tyranny you claim to oppose, we will return, We will not offer alternatives. Understood, Thane replied. The precursor technology went to work. The gray death-consuming Ethon Prime began to slow, then stop, then reverse. The nanobots were being systematically dismantled by forces that operated on principles beyond current scientific understanding. But the damage was done. Nearly a billion Etherians had died, their crystalline cities reduced to lifeless wasteland. The survivors would remember this day for the rest of their civilization's existence. And in the void around the planet, the remnants of 3 fleets hung motionless, waiting to learn what the new galactic order would mean for their species. The Age of Consequence had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Ethon Prime, Admiral Corvin Thane stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Terran Enforcement Station, watching as the latest batch of Galactic Justice Corps recruits completed their training exercises in the void beyond. The station hung at the edge of the Etherian system like a steel and ceramic monument to humanity's new role in galactic affairs. Status report, Commander, he said to Lucia Vega, who now wore the insignia of the GJC's second-in-command. 12 new enforcement fleets are ready for deployment, she replied, consulting her augmented interface. We've got recruitment applications for 47 different species, including some that were formerly allied with the Vorthek. It seems word of our methods has spread throughout the galaxy. They nodded grimly. The Battle of Ethon Prime had indeed sent shockwaves through galactic civilization. Within weeks of the precursor intervention, over 300 species had formally requested inclusion in the new Galactic Justice Compact, seeking protection from the kind of betrayal that had nearly destroyed the Etherians. The compact was simple: species that honored their treaties and protected civilian populations would be defended by the GJC. Those that broke their word or committed atrocities would face immediate military intervention. There was no appeals process, no lengthy diplomatic negotiations. Justice was swift, decisive, and often brutal. What's the situation with the Vorthek remnants? Thane asked. The survivors have been relocated to the Kepler quarantine zone, Vega reported. They're being allowed to consume the biomass of uninhabited worlds under strict supervision. Any attempt to attack inhabited systems will result in immediate termination of their entire species. The Vorthek had learned quickly after losing 3/4 of their fleet at Ethon Prime. The remaining bioships had surrendered without resistance. Their species' hunger for organic matter couldn't be changed, but it could be channeled away from civilized worlds. And the Etherians, Vega's expression darkened. High Councillor Yeveth was executed by her own people 3 months ago. The new government has formally apologized for the betrayal and offered full reparations to the families of our fallen. They have also requested permanent GJC protection. Apparently they're terrified that other species might see their weakened state as an opportunity. Thane walked to the massive viewport, looking down at the scarred surface of Ethon Prime. The nanobotic plague zones had been contained, but the gray wastelands served as a permanent reminder of the cost of betrayal. Memorial gardens were being built around the dead zones, each one containing the crystalline markers of the 2 billion Etherians who had died for their leader's treachery. Sir, Lieutenant Torres approached, now bearing the rank insignia of AGJC Intelligence Coordinator. We've received an urgent communication from the Centauri Collective. There's been a massacre on Proxima Station. Someone's been experimenting with illegal bioweapons. Casualties? Thane asked. 40,000 civilians dead. Another 100,000 infected with some kind of genetic plague. The perpetrators are claiming it was a scientific accident, but intelligence suggests they were testing the weapons for use against the Rigel Commonwealth. Thane sighed. It never ended. For every species that learned to honor their treaties, another would test the boundaries of acceptable behavior. The galaxy was vast, and there were always predators willing to prey on the weak. Prep the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment, he ordered. Full enforcement protocols. I want the perpetrators identified and neutralized within 72 hours, sir. Torres hesitated. The Centauri Collective is claiming that the responsible parties have diplomatic immunity. They're requesting that the matter be handled through traditional channels. Traditional channels failed at Ethon Prime. They replied coldly. We don't honor diplomatic immunity for war criminals. Deploy the fleet. As Torres hurried away to implement the orders, Commander Vega moved to stand beside Thane at the viewport. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the memorial ships that orbited Ethon Prime Terran vessels. that had been converted into monuments to the human crew members who had died in the battle. Do you ever wonder if we become the very thing we fought against? Vega asked quietly, then considered the question. 6 months ago, he had been a fleet admiral fighting to save a species that had begged for humanity's help. Now he commanded a military force that spanned half the galaxy, with the authority to destroy entire civilizations if they stepped out of line. Sometimes, he admitted, but then I remember that we didn't ask for this power. It was forced on us by species that thought they could use us as disposable tools. Now they know better. The precursors could have stopped us, Vega pointed out. They could have quarantined humanity or erased us from existence. Instead, they gave us this authority. Why? Thane smiled grimly. Because they understand something that the Etherians and Vorthic never did. Humanity doesn't just wage war for conquest or survival. We wage war for justice, and sometimes, justice requires a sword. The communication system chimed, indicating an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display activated, revealing the alien features of Councillor BlackHFY of the Rigel Commonwealth, one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Admiral Thane, the reptilian leader said, his voice carrying the weight of barely controlled fear. We have received word of your deployment to the Centauri system. The Commonwealth wishes to assure you that we have no hostile intentions toward any member of the Galactic Justice Compact. I'm pleased to hear that, Councillor, Thane replied. I trust you'll convey that sentiment to any of your citizens who might be tempted to test our resolve. Of course, BlackHFY agreed quickly. The Commonwealth has learned much from the events at Ethon Prime. We have no desire to experience similar consequences. The transmission ended, leaving Thane and Vega alone with their thoughts. Outside the viewport, the Third Fleet was already beginning to form up, its dark hulls bristling with weapons that could reduce a planet to radioactive ash in minutes. Sir, Vega said finally, there's something else. Intelligence reports indicate that several species are beginning to form alliances specifically to counter GJC authority. They're calling it the Sovereignty Coalition. Let them, Thane replied. Unity born of fear is stronger than any alliance based on mutual benefit. When the time comes to test their resolve, they'll remember what happened to the last species that thought they could betray humanity without consequence, as if summoned by his words. A new group of ships appeared on the tactical display sleek vessels, bearing the markings of a dozen different species, all of them flying the banner of the Galactic Justice Compact. They were coming to join the Memorial Fleet, to pay their respects to the humans who had died to establish the new galactic order. They're learning, Vega observed. Yes, Thane agreed. They're learning that betrayal has consequences, that civilian populations must be protected, that treaties must be honored, and most importantly, they're learning that humanity keeps its word, even when that word is a promise of destruction. The Third Fleet completed its formation and prepared to jump to the Centauri system, where another species would learn the cost of testing humanity's resolve. Behind them, the Memorial Fleet continued its eternal vigil around the scarred remains of Ethon Prime, a reminder that the galaxy had entered a new age, an age where justice was no longer a request to be ignored, but a law to be enforced. Admiral Corvin Thane watched the stars and smiled. The galaxy had asked for humanity's help, then betrayed them. In response, humanity had shown them how Earth ends wars with such overwhelming force that no one would ever dare to start them again. The lesson had been written in fire and blood across the void, and every species in the galaxy would remember. If for the next 1,000 years you do not betray humanity and live to forget the consequences,